All right, so we're getting started. The weather's amazing today, as I've been talking about. More squirrels saving their lives. Okay, I'm gonna stop looking in the backyard. Yeah, don't worry about the being late. I mostly have been talking about trees breaking in my backyard because of the ice. So I'm gonna try to not think about the trees breaking in my backyard and just think about the Spanish-American War. The test, so here's all the due date stuff. Weekly question and quiz officially due at midnight on Friday, 11:59 technically. I think the quiz should take about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, somewhere in there. It's 20 questions. I would suggest to you that you take a little longer. You've got an hour as your official amount of time. I would suggest you take as long as you need within that hour so that you can carefully read the answer choices. Remember, college class, so multiple choice, yes. And it's one of those, choose the best answer. Yeah. So some of the answers might look pretty good, but then there's one that's better. And there's rarely one that's just like obviously wrong. Okay. Also, if you're taking the quiz and you notice something wrong with it, if you'll send me an email, apparently the 1301 quiz, I had a duplicate answer. So, oops. Not that that was a terrible thing. I mean, they probably didn't mind, but I did go back and fix it. I'd rather it were right, that sort of thing. So test is open to officially until midnight on Friday. If you start before then, it'll let you finish. I think honestly, it'll let you start even, yeah, I don't think it shuts you out. It just tells you you're late. I think it's like the weekly question. Now, if you don't take it by month, take it on time if you can, honestly, because otherwise I get a little suspicious of you, not gonna lie. Also, I'll give you a survey after the quiz sometime next week, which just says stuff like, was the quiz too easy, too hard? Do you think the review list was helpful? Would you rather have more questions, fewer questions? The reason that there are 20 is because last semester there was, I think I started off with 10 and they were distressed by that, and then 15 wasn't good. So 20 was kind of the sweet spot that they liked last semester because it wasn't so long that they couldn't deal with it, but it wasn't so short that missing one or two questions meant, no hope. So, all right. So quiz should be available and we'll look at the review list for a minute or two. I'm looking at my notes about your class. I have the word Macedonia. I remember why, because I had this student from a communist country who was upset with me because his communist country ran well. And that was true. Macedonia ran pretty well. But yeah, it's small. The notes here. Course documents, and it'll say something like quiz 1 review or timed question review, something along those lines. What it's called. Let me look if I can find it. Goodness. I'm going to cough a little bit more. That was pretty. Okay, sorry. It's right up there with the sneezing as far as me being loud. All right, so course document, it will say unit 1302, unit 1 time question review, what it says. So hopefully that helps a little. It's funny because in some Zoom meetings I can share the screen and some I can't with the, here we go. Oh, I actually can this time. Look at that, that's amazing. Okay, so this thing right here, you see all the stuff I put in here for you? You guys don't even look at this stuff, do you? I know some of you do, by the way. So you've got all the weekly questions for the entire semester, sample answer, and then this is the review for the timed questions. And then you've got all the notes, and then those are chapter made, or not chapter made, publisher made outlines. And then I've got just the unit 1 weekly questions. So there's a lot of stuff in the course documents page. And if you scroll all the way down, you see the book review, assignment, and then a sample book review, which I'm sure I already told you is my husband, because I know he won't sue me for a variety of reasons. Okay. And if you look in the assignments, let's see if this works. Can you see what I see? The assignments page? There it is, Unit 1, timed questions. Okay. And I think, I mean, my page looks different than yours, but I think you can see my comments, and you guys said it seemed to be true. When I write comments on your weekly questions, excuse me, I think you can see them in the grade section of your page. You click on the grade and then the comments or the rubric. Somehow is a choice there to look at, because somebody asked me if I would send them the comments on there in the rubric. Thanks. All right, let's see what else we're going to talk about. Okay, so weekly questions due Friday at midnight, quiz due Friday at midnight. I had somebody last class taking the quiz during class. I don't know if that's ideal. I would say probably not, but you do you. Let's see, what else did I want to say? We'll look at weekly question. Now I have so many things open. How did that happen? Lecture note, time question review, weekly question. Here we go, hopefully. Sorry. What were the causes of stated purposes for and eventual results of U.S. entry into the Spanish-American War? Be sure to discuss USS Maine, Heller and Platt Amendment. Did the citizens of the new U.S. territories prosper, enjoy freedom, accept American rule? And this is from chapter 17. And there's some really specific stuff about whether they liked their freedom, accepted American rule. Sorry, I'm looking for my page because that's I sent that to someone in an email. I know who it was. I think people, all my people know that my neighborhood's the one where all the trees are breaking, because people keep calling me. It's like, I'm teaching. Okay. So for the, how did the folks like their newfound freedom? I think it's 680. There we go. 682 to 685, somewhere in there. Yeah, 682 to 685. Super specific about it. With this question, I do think as long as you answer every part of the question correctly, then you're in good shape. I have read a couple, and some people are leaving something out. And I know this is kind of a long question, but you know, okay. So USS Maine remembers the ship. Oh, you don't remember because we haven't talked about it yet, but we're just about to talk about it. So it'll be okay, I think. All right, I'm checking to see.
The question, like all of it is in that 4 page, like in the end of the chapter.
Yeah. Well, and the headings too are going to lead you exactly where you need to go. So the only trick is making sure you understand what they're telling you, which I know can be tricky. So, and we're about to go over it as well. So I think we'll be okay. All right, let's go over the notes because I'm apparently just really slow today, aren't I? But thankfully, we don't have so much to go over. That's the good news. So sorry. Okay. Oh, goodness. Sorry, looking at the trees. Oh, stop looking at the trees. Okay, let's think about the Spanish-American War, because that's better than what's going on in my backyard. From the U.S. perspective, yes, the Spanish-American War is way better than what's going on in my backyard, because it was really fast and there weren't too many U.S. casualties, and we get a whole lot of stuff, which makes us super happy. As far as does this make the neighbors happy? Not so much. And how does the world see us after this? Well, you have to remember as well, because we don't judge. Well, you can judge people however you want. I don't mean it that way. But historically, when we look at what the actions are, it probably makes more sense to judge it in the context of the actions. So, the rest of the world just kind of went, no, that's what big countries do. So England said, go team. France and Spain were probably right on the same page. And China, what are they going to say? Because historically, I mean, dang, they take over the neighbors and that's what they do. And so does Japan. And yeah, so, people are either going like, go team, that's exactly what we would do. Or the smaller countries are going, man, we're so tired of this crap. So the reason we're excited about it as the United States is it shows that we are emerging as a world power. Yes, a world power. So instead of being a hegemon, you're going, what the heck is a hegemon? Is it like a Pokemon? Yeah, no, maybe. A hegemon is like a regional power. So you're the neighborhood bully, essentially, which you guys may have been in the 8th grade. How about that? But we had been a regional power for quite a while, but now we're starting to be a world power. So we're much more excited about it. Okay, so stuff that leads up to the war. Let's start with that. I know I've got a list here, so let's just follow the list. And your book outlines this stuff with more detail, of course. So yellow journalism. Now, if you're wondering why it's called yellow journalism, are you? You're going like, no, we don't care. Well, that's why you're here. You get all these free bits of information that could help you on Jeopardy someday. You never know. So yellow journalism, okay, so it really means sensational journalism. Not like, wow, that was sensational, that was great, but more like Kardashian or E-News, that kind of stuff. Like, here's the latest gossip, or like news channels do now, like CNN or Fox or CNBC or whatever, the MS, I don't know the news channels. I've seen them all. I just can't remember them all. Where they go like, today in the impeachment trial, shocking new video about the crowds breaking into the Capitol. And you're going like, nah, I saw that on TV. But they're trying to make it more exciting or interesting, maybe even exaggerated or one-sided, so that you will pay attention to it because they want to get ratings. And also, you may have noticed, you watch news channels. You guys are young people. You may not have time for that. But as we already know, your grandparents watch them. It's true. Every time I go see my dad, he's got the Fox News on. I don't know what it is about old people in Fox News, but it's a rule. It's a rule. But anyway. But the news channels like the Fox News, I think the reason my dad likes Fox News is it's more conservative. Now, I know all the channels just have some shows where they just tell you the news, but especially in the evening, they have those guys that tell you all the stuff you want to hear. You want to know, who do you want to impeach? We're getting excited about impeachment now. Let's just do it. We do it all the time. If you watch the CNN, they'll have some guys on there. It's like, do you know how terrible Trump is? It's like, yeah, we know. And MSNBC, I assume, is kind of the same. Oh, okay. The current one. Yeah, the no, it is hard. I think in the modern era, honestly, it was probably hard before as well to get the news, just the news. Because even the local news, you either get the story about the lost dog or the cat lawyer, which honestly was a good story, or the wreck, which we need, I mean, so you know where to avoid, or you kind of get the hyped, the same version of the network news that probably is a little exaggerated. So it is hard to find the news, and if you really want the news, I think you have to watch or look at a variety of different sources and try to figure out what's all in common. And if you can find independent newscasters, which is hard because it's hard to find, I don't know, it's tricky. And it is kind of complicated because we have more information now available than any time ever in the history of history. But it's still hard to figure out which is accurate and which is not. Yeah, it is true. Okay. Now, in this era, the big news is newspapers. So they called this sensational journalism yellow journalism in part because newspaper print had just become much cheaper and the paper itself was cheaper. If you kept the paper for very long, the cheap papers that were really affordable, so everybody bought them, the paper would turn yellow, hence yellow journalism. Yeah. But when you hear the term yellow journalism, it really means that sensational, exaggerated. And we still have similar stuff. And I know we think, oh, maybe you're too young to think of this, but when you go to the grocery store in the old days, my grandmother loved these magazines, but there are these weird news magazines at the check stands. It said like, I can remember my favorite headline was Hillary Clinton has alien baby. I'm pretty sure she didn't, but it said it right there in the Inquirer. That's what it was, the Inquirer or Weekly World News or those exciting kind of things. I think now they just put them on TV, but kind of gossipy news, celebrity news, that kind of stuff. So I always thought of yellow journalism as that, with maybe a few news stories in the middle. But in this instance, yellow journalism was pretty much the newspaper, and their goal was to sell the newspaper. So why that matters? You're going like, why do you talk so long about that? I apologize. So Hurst and Pulitzer were the two major newspaper publishers. You've heard of Pulitzer because there's a prize after him. And I don't know. I don't think Hillary Clinton actually had the alien baby. But she kept it a secret if she did. And I think that was the point of the story. Just secret baby. Might be why the weather's so bad. The alien baby is upset. But Hearst also was a really famous dude, really wealthy dude. I think it was the New York World and the New York Daily, I think, and they owned similar newspapers in Los Angeles. And Hearst eventually will run for president, and they make a movie about him. It's supposed to be the best movie ever made, called Citizen Kane. Anyway, I'm checking the chat, checking the chat. I wish the alien baby would stop. Yeah, okay. Okay. But these guys were competing for readers. And of course, it's big business and you get advertisers and that kind of stuff. So they won the most exciting stories. So when they find out that Cuba's been pushing for its independence, they send newspaper reporters down there to figure out what's going on. And Pulitzer, or is it Hearst? It's Hearst. Sorry, it's Hearst, sends that Western dude, Frederick Remington, who's a Western artist and does some of those bronze sculptures of Native Americans and buffalo and horses and stuff like that that are pretty trendy in people's offices, like people go to their offices anymore. But he's a Western artist. And he sent him to cover the news. And he said, look, the stuff that you'd heard about, it's over. It's not going on anymore. And Hearst apparently cabled him, you supply the pictures, I'll supply the war. So they reported on stuff that had happened, but hadn't happened in a couple of years. And it stirred up people's anti-Spanish feeling and pro-Cuban feelings. So then there's a push to go to war. And then because there's some economic issues, and there's a lot of American businessmen in the sugar trade there, and British as well. Those guys push for the US government to send the military there. So we send the USS Maine, which is an American ship. It's a US ship. So the USS means United States ship. So we send the USS Maine there to protect American assets, to protect the most important trade harbor, most important harbor overall in Cuba, Havana Harbor, and then the ship blows up. And it either blows up because the Spanish blew it up on purpose with these water mines, which they did have. And if the mine hits the ship, then it causes an explosion. Or it might have blown up because in the engine room, they stored the artillery, which is probably a bad call. Yeah, probably. So in the modern era, we think that that's why it blew up. But you're not going to write a story, we blew up our own ship because we stored the artillery in the wrong place. So they're going to blame the Spanish for the ship blowing up. And of course, you get the slogan, remember the Maine and to hell with Spain. So there's a lot of anti-Spanish feeling that's being, what is the right word? Caused. So yeah, the newspapers are stirring up a lot of anti-Spanish feeling in their quest to sell newspapers. Now, Cuba had been pushing for its independence for over a decade. They had kind of round one that was unsuccessful, and then round two, which starts really early 1890s, 1892, 1893. And then the Spanish send this kid, did I just say that? This general, Valeriano Weyler. And he really oppresses the Cuban people, has these reconcentrados, concentration camps, which it's not exactly like what you think in World War II, but it's not good. It's more like a reservation, like a Native American reservation. So the population is concentrated in certain areas, and if you're not in that area, they just shoot you. The problem with the rural reconcentrados was that they didn't have enough water and food, and the sanitary conditions were bad. So people were having trouble with hunger. They were having problem with dehydration. Plus, they didn't have plumbing. So if you got a whole lot of people in one spot in a tropical area and no plumbing, you're going to have poopy smell and disease. So I'm sure that's a very technical term, poopy smell. But they end up with all sorts of diseases related to the lack of sanitary condition, and people die. And then the Spanish government actually recalls Valeriano Weyler because he's just doing a terrible job. And they say, look, you know, we just have to admit we are not going to be able to we're not going to be able to keep Cuba forever. So it's time to negotiate with the Cuban government, or at least the leaders in colonial Cuba, and try to figure out ways that we can work together on stuff, gradual independence. That's about the time that the yellow journalists were sent down there. So we're talking 1896, 97. So all the really bad stuff that you could write the stories about that were crazy and how horrible the Spanish were, they weren't necessarily untrue. They just hadn't happened in a couple of years. So most of that stuff was really kind of past. But there were Cuban revolutionaries, actively, or independence fighters, I don't know how you want to look at it, who were raising money in Miami and New York City. And the reason they're going there, you know why they were going there, because that's where there were larger Cuban immigrant populations, and there's some money there. So Jose Marti is one of the guys that goes there to raise money, and he'll be known as the father of Cuban independence. He's more of a poet and fundraiser, and he dies fighting his first battle. So he probably should have stayed as a poet and fundraiser. That's my editorial comment of the day. Same way I should not be fighting any battles. Yeah, absolutely. Okay. All right. We already mentioned that the Maine got sent to the Havana Harbor. It blows up. Okay. U.S. investigation says it was a Spanish water mine. They probably knew better even back then, but you know, who wants to say we blew up our own ship accidentally? And when there's a push to go to war with Spain, even though McKinley may not be very excited about it, he's going to be pushed into it. And Teddy Roosevelt, you may have heard of him, who was the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, makes sure that he positions the Navy near the Philippines, Guam, Puerto Rico, and Cuba before he quits. And he quits so that he can go actually fight. And the book does talk quite a bit about Teddy Roosevelt. You can slide him into your question answer if you like. Also, tree broke. Oh, it was so loud too. Okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, sorry. Back to the war, not trees breaking in the backyard. Teddy Roosevelt, that's what I was talking about when the tree broke. So Teddy Roosevelt, if you have not picked I know some of you are already reading Black Like Me, which is a weird book, but I still think is useful. And we will talk more about the book review, but really when we get closer to spring break, because that's when I think you're going to read your book and work on the review. But Teddy Roosevelt's always interesting. So you could read a biography of him, and he's just one of the weirdest dudes we've ever had as president. And you'll probably like most of the things that he does, but he's really interesting. He is. He's a Harvard graduate, but he also will box with you, and he speaks many different languages and wrote a book about birds. So he's and fought in the Spanish-American War with designer uniforms, and they spent the money to take their own polo ponies down to ride. So it was really weird. Yep, and he got shot. No, not the whole tree. It just looked like about half, and it's on the fence line. Okay, he really was giving a campaign speech when he runs for president round 2 as a progressive. He starts his own party. Well, he kind of starts his own party. And somebody shoots him while he's giving the speech, and he gets knocked down, of course, by the gunshot, and then he gets back up and finishes the speech because he's Teddy Roosevelt. It's what he does. Yeah, he's interesting. He is. It's just most of the people who write about him, if you read like the big historical biographies, they're very scholarly. It's still, to me, like really interesting, but it may be, and I'm not trying to be rude at all. It's just, I think your generation reads differently than my generation does. And again, not a goal here to be rude, but it just, it'll be an adjustment for you. I'm not saying it would be bad. Okay. All right. Well, we do go to Cuba to free the Cubans, not for any self-interest. I can't believe some of you are already suggesting in your essays that we went there for imperialism. How dare you? How dare you? No, we're just going to free Cuba, or maybe for some other reasons as well. But the reason that I say we're just going to free Cuba is because that's what we said in the Teller Amendment. So the Teller Amendment is an amendment to the proclamation of war against Spain, which says the only reason we're going there is to free Cuba. It says it more eloquently, of course. All right. The war's really short, last 4 months. My trees in the backyard lasted longer than that. It's true they did. It probably does take longer to get troops there than the length of the actual battles. There are times, like Teddy Roosevelt's group, the Rough Riders, it was his idea, not mine. They train near San Antonio, which is why if you go to San Antonio, especially the Menger Hotel, Menger, I hear my little accent a bit when I say Menger. I'll have to work on that. When you see the Menger Hotel signs, they'll say like Teddy Roosevelt was here, Teddy Roosevelt drank here. Teddy Roosevelt probably drank a lot of places. But they trained in Texas and then went to Cuba. And they also took reporters with them because these guys were well-known guys. They were pretty wealthy guys. So they had the money to, pay the reporters to go with them, also pay to design their own designer uniforms because everybody else was using the leftovers from what is that big war? Civil War, sorry. And a lot of those were wool and they were going to Cuba and that's not a good place to wear wool. Neither is Texas, except today. Probably okay. But these guys had their own Brooks Brothers designed uniforms and their own press corps with them. And the book will talk a little bit about them. Now, that is not to say that they didn't really fight and they probably weren't really heroic. It is just to say they were a little different. They were a little. But we have lots of reporting about groups of people who went to fight there because we were super excited about the war. You may notice when they first talking about the war, they estimated we need a couple 100,000 volunteers and they got a couple million. So we had more people than we knew what to do with. Now they're going to send the enlisted folks down there first, primarily the African-American folks to, do the grunt work kind of stuff, to kill mosquitoes, to do all kinds of stuff down there. So to get ready, destroy bridges or build bridges or whatever it is you need to do to fight. But you have a combination of all these volunteers, millions of volunteers, and a pretty small regular army who goes first. The Secretary of State does call it a splendid little war because it's short and we gain a lot of stuff. What we gain is control of Cuba, or not, since we said we were going to free it, control of Philippines, Guam, and Puerto Rico. Now, with the Philippines, we had told them, look, we sent, because of Teddy Roosevelt, sent the Navy to the harbor or in the Philippines. Oh, crud. Manila Bay. It's like, why can I not think of the name of it? In Manila Bay, and they had controlled the harbor, but we didn't have troops there. So we made a deal with Emilio Aguinaldo, who's kind of the father, it's not kind of, he's the father of Filipino independence. And our deal was if they controlled the land, we controlled the sea, and when the war was over, they could be free. That kind of rhymed, which wasn't my goal. And then when the war was over, we decided, yeah, they're not quite ready to be free. They did not agree with us. So Aguinaldo led troops in what is referred to sometimes as the Filipino-American War until he gets captured and imprisoned. And then that kind of calms down. And then we'll send William Howard Taft there to keep them in order. All right. So the Filipinos are going to be upset with us because we promised them their freedom and didn't give it to them. The Cubans might also be a little upset too, because in the Platt Amendment, which we attached to the Cuban Constitution, which is a trick. You know, if you can write somebody else's constitution, you know, you got a little more power than they would probably like for you to have. We say that any decision that they make that we think endangers the United States, not in their best interest, that we can kind of veto it and intervene as needed. So we're telling them you can make your own decisions as long as we agree with your decisions. Okay. I don't know how hard you uh-oh, there's somebody at the door. Will you, hang on one sec. Okay, I'm pausing for, okay. Sorry for the delay. Oh my gosh, it's so crazy out there. Yeah, I'm gonna go cut, not today, probably. But I lost 2 trees in the last snow and it looks like 4 so far today. Dang, and they're all right on the fence line. It looks like next, okay, never mind. Back to the notes, sorry. Really am distracted by the trees falling down. It does look like the big one got struck by lightning, but it really did just crack. I've got a chainsaw, but yeah, I don't know. It's probably not an old woman thing to do. Even though I'm from the Ozarks. Okay, back to the notes. Oh my gosh, sorry, I got so excited, didn't I? Okay, all right. And I apologize for interrupting the conversation about statistics. Statistics to me, you know what I teach. So, but I have a college degree. You're shocked by that. I have a degree in in guidance and counseling, and we had a class on statistics there. And I have a friend who has a PhD in math. I don't know why we're friends. It's soccer actually is why. And he worked at the UT NASA Research Library, or laboratory, excuse me. And he, you know, he's cool with math. And I said, hey, I'm studying statistics. It's not really math, is it? He goes, no, it's not really math. He was quite serious about that. So don't tell your statistics teacher I said that, but okay. Back to business, even though I was distracted by things breaking in the backyard. Okay, so the war, 4 months, we talked about that, splendid little war, Roosevelt quit, Rough Riders. Okay, we're talking about the end of the war now, which is good. Maybe I can finish the class without running to the door because someone rang the doorbell because trees are breaking everywhere. Okay, U.S. gains control of Cuba, Guam, Puerto Rico, Philippines in the Treaty of 1898, Treaty of Paris. There's lots of treaties of Paris, so oftentimes you want to put the date. Now, when you're answering the weekly question, if you talk about the Treaty of Paris, I promise you I'll know which one you're talking about. So you don't have to put the date. But the treaty that ended the American Revolution was called the Treaty of Paris. Some people originally called the treaty that ended World War I the Treaty of Paris, but of course we typically call it the Treaty of Versailles. All right, more information. Platt Amendment, we already talked about that. Platt Amendment allows the U.S. to intervene politically, financially, even militarily if Cuba makes decisions we disagree with. I would usually tell my students, I guess I still am telling my students, that this is sort of like us making Cuba our teenager. So it's like with your parents. Your parents trust you, you're pretty good kids, you make pretty good decisions. So they give you a lot of freedom, and you get to keep that freedom until you do something that they think is dumb. So my example, because I had a student that actually did this, it's never a good call, but their parents gave them a car. Can you imagine parents just giving you a car? Back in my day, that didn't happen. I had a bicycle till I was 20. I was in better shape, by the way. But this kid's parents gave him a car, a nice car too, nicer than the Kia Soul that I drive. Of course, back then they didn't have Kia Souls. But anyway, Kia Soul is a good car, by the way. I'm not complaining. And no trees have fallen on it. But this kid had a nice car, and his parents, I guess, had a little GPS tracking in it or something like that. So the kid Saturday night said, "Hey, I'm going to go to my friend's house and we're going to study," because that's what every teenager does on Saturday night. And they checked into the GPS tracking. Apparently, they were studying on 6th Street in Austin. That's probably not the best place to study, just a bit of advice. And of course, in a pandemic, nobody goes anywhere except, yeah, never mind. So the parents called in the Platt Amendment there and took the car away. So we called in the Platt Amendment from time to time. We decided who the leader of Cuba was going to be from time to time, what they were going to spend their money on, who they were going to trade with. And you'll notice that we're going to start doing that kind of stuff all over Latin America during this time period. So we're going to intervene in lots of different countries in, well, including Mexico, but Central and South America, when we feel like their government isn't doing what they're supposed to do. And we'll just go in and redo their banking system. I mean, we just go in because we can, because we're the hegemon and because we're turning into a world power. So really, most of our Latin American neighbors probably didn't hate us so much. Mexico was a little frustrated because, you know, we did take the top third of northern third of their country. And they're not going to like us anymore for some other stuff that we're about to do in the next era. But this is part of crud, more cracking. This is part of the reason that our Latin American friends aren't thrilled with us. Up until this time, mostly we peacefully coexisted, and we were stronger than they were, but we weren't invading them. This is, yeah, this is next level, and it's not going to make the neighbors very happy. Okay, all right. So I'm hoping that even though I had all those interruptions with me screaming at my neighbor, not at her, but like, look at my backyard. Yeah, okay. All right. The tree, yeah, tree. Oh my goodness. Okay. Yeah, watch out for the trees in the neighborhood. Crud, more cracking. All right. So hopefully, even though that was kind of a little scattered, I apologize. Between the notes, the outline that you have, the textbook, and maybe the lecture, although the lecture might be a little iffy today, you have an opportunity to find things to help you answer that last question. And I'm going to always tell you the book and those questions are meant to be together. They're like Valentine's. Yeah. See how timely I'm trying to be here? All right.
Salting on my wounds, nice. I was kidding.
What? What did you say? I'm sorry.
You said Valentine, I said salting on my wounds.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Yeah, all my friends are posting. There's some like Valentine's Day challenge. They're all posting. I'm looking for the quiz review. They're all posting. Oh, my neighbor just posted pictures of my backyard. I'm sorry. All my friends are posting like when they met their spouse and how long they've been in love and how great their love is. So I responded to one of them. I posted cherry cobbler. Yeah. I said, "This is my Valentine. We just met today. I said I love you first." That sort of thing. Yeah, yeah. So I'm not trying to add to your wounds. I'm wounded as well. I got the cherry cobbler. Even though I know I've mentioned my husband, but my husband's deceased, which is why I know he doesn't mind that I'm posting his book review. So it wasn't yesterday, so why I can joke about it. All right, a little, but not much. So quiz review. I made a list of, oh, that is definitely the wrong class. Okay, sorry. Dang. Yeah, don't drive on bridges. That's some number one advice of the day. 1302 weekly question, unit 1 quiz review. Unit 1. Okay. I think this is your class instead of 1301. Yes. Sorry. Yeah, you guys don't drive on the bridges, the overpasses, stay on, on the ground. It's warmer. It's warmer. Those overpasses freeze over. Here's your review list of stuff. And hopefully this review list will be helpful on the quiz. The quiz, yes. 20 questions. Yeah, I really think it will be helpful. And I was having fun in color coding when I made this. So successes and failures of Reconstruction, that was your question. Don't forget about Andrew Johnson getting impeached. Yeoman farmers, sharecroppers, cropland system, carpetbaggers, scalawags. So review these things before you take the quiz. Military Reconstruction, KKK Enforcement Act, sometimes called the Force Acts. Look over presidential election, 76, compromise of 77, why people moved west. That's the ranching, farming, mining thing, which is families, which is dudes. How are Native Americans treated? You know the answer, plus that was your weekly question. Definition, importance, and results of Knights of Labor. So it's the first major labor union. Haymarket Square, how are those two things related? Then we got rich dudes, Carnegie, JP Morgan, Rockefeller, Vanderbilt, labor unions, again, Knights of Labor, beginning of AFL, living and working conditions for wage workers. Just remember they're crappy. It's not good. There's no minimum wage, no protection at work, that kind of stuff. But still, they voted for whoever the political machines told them to vote for. Cause and effect of the Spanish-American War. When was it? Where was it? Mostly Cuba. Why did it happen? Meaning and importance of, did we talk about Plessy versus Ferguson already? Crud. Maybe we did, maybe we didn't. Let me go back and look at the notes. Definition and impact of the Populist Party, importance of Booker T. Washington and Tuskegee Institute. I know we didn't talk about that, so let's mention that really quick. And purpose of importance of the open door policy. So let's look at these last couple things. I know we talked a lot about the Populist Party. I know we did. You're going don't talk about it anymore. And then I know we talked about Plessy because I told you it's the most important Supreme Court case, and you have to remember it's top 10 at least. And it makes segregation legal. So yeah, I told you about Plessy, and his name was Homer and Adolph, and yeah, okay, I remember. New Orleans, he could pass, rain, yep, okay, we did that. Booker T. Washington's going to be one of those dudes that emerges out of Reconstruction and becomes really prominent, prosperous, powerful, that kind of thing. He's going to start something called the Tuskegee Institute, which is now Tuskegee University, where you could go to college if you wanted. It's in Alabama. It's not super close by, but still prominent, important, historically Black college. And if you ever wonder, sorry, Coke Zero, if you're ever wondering why they have historically Black colleges, I'm just showing this proof, Coke Zero. Because historically, white colleges wouldn't let Black guys in. So, because I don't know, I was reading some post where somebody's teacher said, well, if everybody wants to be equal, why do you have Black colleges? Like, oh dear, didn't you have college history? But they forgot. They forgot. We'll just go with that. Because it was a high school teacher. It's like, dang, that's not good. Dang, high school teacher. You got to know stuff. Okay. So Booker T. Washington starts this college, Tuskegee Institute, and he raises a whole bunch of money, and it becomes pretty prominent, and he's pretty successful. And we'll talk about him more in the next chapter as well. But he will be a pretty prominent Southern Black educator. So a bunch of people go to Tuskegee, and if you go to Tuskegee, not only do you get to learn about history and French and literature and all the other cool stuff you learn in college, you go there, you're going to learn how to build stuff. You're going to learn how to do your plumbing. You're going to learn how to fix your farming equipment. And if you're wondering, why are we teaching that at college? We're teaching that at college because we're in the South. That's why. It's not so much because there'll be people that'll complain about that in the North, and they'll say, you know what? You're just teaching us that because you're Black, because we're Black, and you don't think that we can do intellectual work. And then Booker T. Washington go like, nope, I'm just teaching that because you're going to live in the South, and you're probably going to have an agricultural related job, no matter if you're, if you have a degree in French literature or something, if you stay in the South, which he wanted people to do to build up the economy of the South for Southern Blacks. So Booker T. Washington, super prominent, important educator in the South, really successful college, raises a lot of money, especially from Northern white guys, especially Northern white guys. Writes his book, Up from Slavery. You could read that book. It's an autobiography. You could read that for your book review if you wanted. Up from Slavery it's because he was a slave before the Civil War. So it's his story, but it also is a fundraising tool. And you have to keep that in mind if you read that, because he never really talks badly about how he was treated by white people. So you know that there's some stuff he's leaving out, but he's leaving some of that stuff out because he's raising money from white people. So it's not, his book serves a purpose. I'm not trying to say he's being sneaky. He's raising money to, yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? It is tricky. But Booker T. Washington, really prominent educator, founder of Tuskegee Institute, which becomes Tuskegee University in Alabama. The very famous George Washington Carver is a professor there. I like him because he's from near my hometown in Joplin, Missouri. Plus, he's really smart, and he'd rather work at Tuskegee than Harvard or other places. I really like that about him because he's a preeminent botanist, one of the most important experts in the world, and he chooses to work at Tuskegee where he doesn't make nearly as much money, but it's the cause. You know, he wants to help African Americans in the South who were former slaves to gain wealth, to gain prosperity and help their communities and their families. And yeah, and both these guys, I'm talking George Washington Carver, but I didn't write about him. And there's no question about him. He's just my dude because, you know, he's from near the hometown. And he's super nice. I didn't know him. Booker T. Washington will be controversial, not in this chapter. Later on, we'll talk about his controversy, but it's mostly that the stuff I just told you about, how there's an emphasis on really practical agricultural related skills, no matter what your degree is. And people sometimes saw that as demeaning or maybe not pushing students enough. And he saw it as practical. You know, his worldview is a little different. All right, open door policy. Whew, we're almost done, aren't we? No more trees have broken. It's good. The open door policy is a trading policy, TRADING policy for the United States, primarily that we would like to trade with China. Something cracked. And China would not like to trade with us because they're China and they're farther away and they already have enough people to trade with. They had developed, you might remember this from world history, spheres, SPHERES, regions of influence within China. So like certain parts of China traded with Japan, certain parts traded with France, certain parts traded with England. So they divided them up and they had 6 of those. We were not one of the 6 countries they traded with. So we said, you should just trade with everyone in the world. It would be more fair because we wanted them to be more fair because we wanted them to trade with us. And so we sent something called open door notes to them. So it'd be like a text or tweet or something in their day, like, hey, we love you, please trade with us. And they went like, no, or they didn't open it. And then they had something called the Boxer Rebellion. And it was a Chinese nationalist rebellion. So within their countries, like, too many foreigners here, too much foreign influence, get the foreigners out, get the foreigners out. That's what they said. And we sent troops to help put down the Boxer Rebellion because we just are globalists and we want everyone to trade with everyone, or we just didn't want to risk the idea that China wouldn't trade with us. So when the war was over and the Chinese government was able to put down the rebels, and part of the reason that they wanted to put down the rebels is the people who controlled the Chinese government were making a ridiculous amount of money from trade. So they put down the rebellion, and then we got our troops back. Then we sent another open door notes like, hey, did you see how much we loved you? We sent troops to put down the Boxer Rebellion. And they go like, all right. And so they had a more open trading policy. Talks about that toward the end of the chapter. Yeah, toward the end of the chapter. So open door policies are pushed, especially with China, to get them to open trade to the United States. I know what you're thinking. That was a mistake because now we're in debt. Is that what you're thinking? I don't know what you're thinking. But during this time period, we were the largest manufacturing nation in the world. So our thought was we got to open our markets to everybody so they can buy our stuff. We needed to sell our stuff. So yeah, now China kind of does that. It's like, hey, buy our stuff. We have stuff too, but China has more stuff. Okay. Aw, I'm sorry about Nathaniel and his Wi-Fi. Oh, that may help me there here in a minute though, because I really should take roll. Even though trees are cracking and I'm distracted and that sort of thing. Yeah. Okay, so you guys help me with roll here in a sec. All right. I feel like I'm probably done. Goodness. I hope that today's class was at least partly useful. All right, let me pause. Now I'll just stop.